Selected quotes on celibacy and spirituality. Saint Germain. The seed within man and woman is only intended for the sacred office of creating a body by which another soul may come into physical embodiment. At all other times, the glorious light within the body should be raised into the top of the head and allowed to flow up in adoration onto the mighty I Am Presence. Then by uplifted thought and feeling, one can do creative work at the mental level through glorious ideas of art, music, invention, discovery, research, and the creation of beauty and harmony of every description through a service that blesses humanity, and therefore the individual who gives it, instead of wasting the wonderful liquid light, the marvelous God-given essence of life, in sex sensation and excesses, whereby the body becomes decrepit, flabby, crippled, face-lined, eyes dull, the whole structure stupid and feeble, the brain inactive, sight and hearing impaired, and the memory not able to function. This energy should be rightly used in wonderful, idealistic, creative activity. In such constructive consciousness and accomplishment, the physical body would remain eternally useful and beautiful, the brain and the faculties keen, alert and active, and the whole physical expression would become the image and likeness of the living God, truly the temple of the Most High. If this life essence is released at the generative center for sex pleasure, instead of building a new physical embodiment for another soul, the process of disintegration of the physical body is started, and the journey to self-generated dissolution of the body begins. It matters not what human opinion says, to the contrary. This is the inevitable, inexorable law of physical embodiment, and there is no person in the universe who can change it. This is the principal reason for the condition that is called death within the race as a whole. Let anyone who disagree with this truth compare the brain and body of one who conserves its liquid light over a period of few years with that of one who has wasted it over a similar period, and he will not need any other proof. The conservation of this liquid electronic light and the conscious lifting of it by adoration to the mighty I Am Presence and by the power of the mind through the control of the attention is the way of perfection and is safe, sound, sensible, and reasonable. It can have only harmonious, constructive result to the mind, the body, and world of the individual. Humanity has not, except in a very small degree, understood this truth, or thousands would have become ascended masters long before now. In order to rise out of the degradation, misery, poverty, and disaster in which the mass is now wallowing, the individual must come to a clear understanding of this law in the outer activity of his mind. Through his conscious knowledge and control of the emotions, he shuts the door to the most dangerous and subtle suggestions from the psychic plane, which is the most unrecognized enemy and vicious activity of the sinister force in this world. All through the ages, there have been certain standards of conduct necessary for the student who desires to reach beyond certain attainments. This is the conserving and governing of the life force through the sex. The proper, clean use of the sex is for the expansion and expression of love in the procreation of a form that the incoming soul may have an harmonious and loving disposition and temperament. Mankind in general and the doctors have distorted things pitifully. The individual who wants to rise into the God presence and live there needs the energy he wastes. The very energy individual wastes is the force and strength by which they are enabled to hold fast to the God presence. This energy is the life they need to enable them to turn and hold steadfast to the God presence. When the outer has for centuries used life's energy to create long conditions, that waste of the energy becomes a wide open drain upon the consciousness of individuals. Doctors are responsible for much of this terrible condition, for they teach the gratification of the sex appetite, and that is the greatest avenue of waste with which human beings have to contend. This is what makes it impossible to hold fast to the God presence long enough to attain the mastery. It is 95% of the cause of old age and loss of sight, hearing, and memory, as these faculties only cease to function when there is no longer a stream of this life energy flowing into the cellular structure of the brain. You cannot tell this to individuals until they have had such hard knocks that they are almost desperate with the misery of their own creation before they will listen to you. The will is absolutely nothing without this life energy. True love never requires sex contact of any kind. Men and women who have lost the controlling power over their passion, which may be either sex or anger, have knowingly or unknowingly become entangled in the psychic stratum of thought and feeling, thereby opening the door of their beautiful and wonderful temples of God. Through the open door, the forces within the psychic stratum fasten upon them, intensifying their own passion into an uncontrolled condition which otherwise might be controlled. Far better had such individuals walked into a den of rattlesnakes, for then they would have but thrown off the physical bodies and be free, being free. But once enmeshed in this psychic sphere, they are often bound for many embodiment. Why is this? Because they make records within their mental world from which they do Gentlemen, I say to you very frankly, many of the doctors and your associates have caused you to believe that you could utilize your sex desire without any limit and retain success. You cannot do it. I say to you frankly, having watched mankind for centuries, you cannot do it. Just as surely as you waste that energy for pleasure gratification, one day you will find yourself depleted without strength and energy, and your success that once was yours will have vanished from your experience. These are great laws, gentlemen, and do not let the accumulated desire govern you any longer. I say to our youth, what a magnificent opportunity. It is quite right for anyone who wishes to bring forth another form, procreation of their kind, to use the sex for that, but it was never intended for pleasure gratification. because that is a waste of that great life. Now notice what the effect is. Where your attention is, there you are, and there is the majority of your life energy flowing. Now notice this, gentlemen. Here is the dividing line, right here, at your solar plexus. Right above your hip is the dividing line, so to speak, between the divine and the human. If your attention is upon sex desire, you drive all that energy down away from your heart and brain. And how can you have the intelligence to keep you from making mistakes if you do that? Observe the youth today who are 18, 19, 20, sometimes 22 years old, filled with the limitless energy and vitality, and then let them be drawn into the sex excess and see how quickly that beauty of form, that limitless vitality and energy have vanished. That is because that which is being wasted through that desire is life. It is vitality, it is energy. I assure you, and you see it before you throughout mankind. I could cite to you and call by name 100 men, for I have their record, that attained great power of achievement. When they had gained everything in the outer world their hearts desired, power, wealth, and authority, then when they seemed not to have any further victories to win, they turned to the last thing by which the sinister force seizes upon mankind, the gratification of the sex desire. Within 5 years, every one of those men became failures because their excess was very great. That is why, gentlemen, idle minds today are the most dangerous thing before mankind, because that is where the sinister force drives the attention. As the messenger says, whether in the dance hall or the colleges, the university or elsewhere, that sinister thing through the jazz music has driven in the most diabolical suggestions in movement and all to the young people, trying to quickly drag them into the sex desire, which the sinister force knows is the failure of all mankind. Gentlemen, the eyes of the world are upon you. Now believe me when I say this in all kindness, but as you represent the light and the ascended masters, you must govern these things if you wish the light to take its dominion more quickly. Now those who are opposing this light are constantly projecting at you thoughts of sex desire, disobedience, and all that kind of thing to cause discredit upon the light. I assure you, do not expect when I say these words some miracle to be performed in a few hours, but I say to you with your earnest obedience to the light and your purity of thought and feeling, when you waste your sex energy, you're depriving yourselves of everything you need for your victory and success in the outer world. Mankind has not understood these things. I speak frankly to you today because you are honest, fine, and sincere, and I want you to know these things. You need that energy in your body. That is your life you are wasting. You waste it through anger, jealousy, hatred, and all those kind of things. But the greatest is the waste through the sex energy, and all the destructive forces of mankind are focused upon mankind today for that one thing, to get them to waste their energy so they cannot hold to their presence and power of life and have freedom. Gentlemen, do you realize that great ones, that great ones, the ascended master Jesus said, the last enemy to be overcome was death. And how does death come about? In reality, there is no death, but he meant the release of yourself from your physical bodies. Gentlemen, when your desire goes down below the heart, you are dragging yourselves into so-called death, because one day it will release your energy from your body until you can no longer hold to the body, and that is the only reason for death. So-called, your energy is wasted. It is gone. I tell you, gentlemen, the need today is in retaining that mighty energy in your body. Pass it back to the presence so that the power of that mighty light ray going forth can carry that sustenance from the physical octave of the physical body into your world of activities through physical result. It is the only way you will ever win any victory, health, strength, courage, power of achievement. It only comes through that stream of life and energy from your own God presence, your mighty I am. But if you let that go down and carry out, where is your energy retained? I do not mean mankind should not use the life force for procreation of their kind, because that must yes be done, but that is sufficient. Mankind is succumbing to these conditions because they have not understood that the waste of that energy is a thing that has left them a prey to the destructive forces. Will you understand me when I say I long for that day when the great law of life permits me to stand before you in my tangible body and show you what it means, the conservation of the energy of life? The day I can stand before you and blaze the light from my body that would fill this room, send from my head, my throat, my heart, my hands, those mighty rays direct to you, then you will understand what it means to conserve the energy of life. That is why we as ascended beings have limitless power, because in the ascended state, gentlemen, there are no such desires. There is no such thing as sex desire in the ascended state. That only belongs to the human octave.